Sporting it for everybody. Andy, Jacko, hi, welcome everyone. So welcome to Music Highlight TV, episode 18. There is an end of term feel about this show, even though we're nowhere near Christmas. It feels a little bit like it is the last show of the year before Christmas. And we are joined today by, I'm going to say the team awesome of Music Ally. It is your marketing experts, and they're going to be talking in anticipation of the publication next week of Music Ally's best music marketing campaigns of the year, Sandbox, and talking about their personal favorite, or a couple of their personal favorite campaigns of the year. There are no spoilers for the actual winners.
Should we put in a caveat and say that some of these may be in the final and some of them may not, but we're not going to say either way? These are just ones that we personally liked.
That's good teasing. Thanks, Eamonn. So some of these may be in the Sandbox, and some of them may not. But we're going to talk about them in a bit more detail. See the ones that we liked, and we're going to. It's good for anybody who wants to who's looking forward to the publication of it and to keep their ideas fresh. So joining us today, let's go around the panel. We have author and journalist Eamonn Forde, who oversees the campaign of the year Sandbox issue, as well as in the normal Sandbox issues, behind the campaign and campaigns analysis parts, and as well as that, recently published a book about the final days of EMI. Hello, Eamonn.
Hello. Yes, I should caveat this for anyone who is looking for teasers for the end of your Sandbox. You're not getting any, but we did have a staggering number of entries this year, which was incredibly encouraging. Obviously, this was, and I'm sure we will talk about this in the next hour, it was a really, really strange year, but it was an incredibly productive year and innovative year for marketing campaigns. And I think that's reflected by the huge number of entries. So we had to up the number of finalists for the, we usually did about 40, so we had to up it to 50 because there were just so many genuinely great campaigns put forward. So I know this sounds like a platitude that it was really hard to pick, but it genuinely was. There was so many great entries. So well done.
Right. Well, like you say, we'll dig into that a bit further as well. And obviously, one possibility is that the current situation in the world has encouraged people to be extra creative, which I guess is a good thing. So we'll chat about that further. And Marlen, Hüllbrock, Sandbox's tools expert. We should clarify the tools as a section of Sandbox, and Music Highlight marketing executive. Hi, Marlen. Thanks for joining us. Our German in London, whereas I am in Berlin. We've done a sort of exchange student style situation. Hi, Marlen.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for joining us. And as ever, Music Highlight's SVP of Digital Strategy, Patrick Ross, who's joining us all the way from the USA today. Hi, Patrick.
Hey there, Joe. Happy to be here.
Thank you for exaggerating your accent for us.
Very cosmopolitan.
Very cosmopolitan. Hey, we're crossing we're spanning sort of two continents. How many different countries are we in here? I don't know. Many.
Well, I'm broadcasting from about 1962, just in terms of how I feel. So
okay, excellent. Before we crack on, it's a bit of knowledge for everybody. If you spot the segue, we have a new free weekly newsletter called The Knowledge, which Music Highlight TV is now sort of part of that free strand. It's Music Highlight's free weekly newsletter, an at-a-glance overview of the craziness of the modern music industry. Next week's news, so you can sign up. Patrick has put the link kindly in the chat. Click there. It's basically one click, add your email address, and next week you'll get the newsletter. And next week's newsletter will include the Sandbox report. So the Sandbox report we're discussing today will come next week to you in the Knowledge newsletter, and it also has bits and pieces from news, analysis, and learnings from across Music Ally's industry standard subscriber service. So sign up now and enjoy the goodness that will arrive with a wet thump in your inbox every week. So that's the hard sell out of the way. Now, as a reminder, these are our panel's personal favorites this year. They're not the best, and they're just reflective of the ones that really stood out for them. So, Eamonn, let's start with you. And before we get your first choice, let's have a little bit of an overview of this year's Sandbox, the sort of best campaigns of the year. You were saying that there was a lot higher number of entries this year than normal, and they were highly creative. So what were sort of any general trends you spotted
Well,
across the entries?
obviously, a lot of stuff was revolving around the fact that like concerts like touring had ended, which was obviously a thing that a lot of marketing slipstream. So I think generally what we were seeing was that campaigns were being conceived to kind of run for a longer period of time. That bit of proxy marketing that live would have filled in was expected as kind of incentives to drive people to stream. A lot of really interesting uses of live streaming as well, obviously, because then suddenly this was kind of forcing everything into the mainstream. And a lot of really interesting stuff with D2C as well, because that as a kind of a sales driver was really important. So lots of stuff like that. Yeah, there were some things that were an explicit reaction to COVID, and people were quite open about how they had to change, kind of scrap their plans just suddenly, because everything that they had, particularly those campaigns that would have been kind of landing April and May, were the ones that were kind of put through the ringer the most, because everything that they had lined up, just all certainties had gone.
You've anticipated my next question, really. I was going to. You speak to a lot of people from major labels and independent labels in the course of putting this together. What did the people who were in this situation, who had to make really, really fast changes, scrapping something or making or pivoting to live stream was the sort of the common thing at the time. What was, did they think that this, I mean, what was their feeling about that? Did they feel like that they sort of found triumph in adversity, or did they find that things could move easily?
I think most people were surprised about suddenly, because I guess with a lot of marketing, because you've got so many different kind of moving parts and stakeholders, if we want to be puncy about it. So you've got the label, you've got the artist, you've got management, you've got maybe external marketers as well. And kind of trying to appease all of those people and have all of those people kind of input into something is very complex. But I think people were they just really understood that everything had to be kind of torn up and started from again. And I think some people find that quite liberating. Obviously, it was incredibly stressful. But then suddenly, if you just go, right, okay, if everything is off the table, that means that there are no rules or no templates. So I think people were prepared to experiment a bit more, just simply because it was uncharted territory. So all of those old certainties had gone out of the window. And I think people were just prepared just to try something and just go, well, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But let's just do something. And I think there was less kind of ego between the different stakeholders, because I'm sure marketing people will kind of occasionally roll their eyes about management's intervention, and management will do the same about marketers and all of those. And I think they all realized that this was something where the egos had to be parked at the door, because they had to change, and they had to change really quickly. And it also shows that maybe this kind of very complex long-term planning isn't necessarily a good thing. If you have something that happens where you have to suddenly become incredibly flexible. It's not just the third single on the album's bombed at radio, so what do we do to try and kind of generate interest ourselves? If everything's gone, what do we do? And I think people were, I thought that people did interesting things, and we're kind of prepared to just try stuff that they wouldn't have done before. And also artists, what a lot of people did say that is that artists are obviously a lot more available than they were. So,
well, I was going to ask, because you mentioned about the D2C thing, and also was this a case of did it almost provide extra layers of creativity, but also was that driven by the artist, really, because they had to connect the essence of the artist to the fans in some sort of creative way to keep things moving?
I've been speaking for a completely different piece on D2C to lots of D2C experts, just on kind of what happened. And the big theme coming out of this was that artists just kind of saw D2C as a thing that was over there. They kind of focused on it for a couple of weeks when the album was coming out to drive pre-orders, and then they kind of forgot about it. And now they realized that, because apart from streaming, that was their kind of main source of income for the year, and they had to kind of come up with ideas. So it was like, they're starting now to think of D2C as this regular thing that they have to do, in the same way that they have to do all of their social media, that they have to push the streaming side of things. D2C is just not this flashpoint moment. D2C is this ongoing thing. And I think certainly some labels I spoke to, some managers, some D2C retailers, so that artists finally got it. Said like the really smart artists were really engaged with D2C and they understood the importance of it. And now I think they said that there's this complete kind of gear shift. Everyone's really involved with it. One label person I spoke to said that it's now their Friday checklist is it's D2C is there. It's not just this vague thing. And they said that that's definitely going to carry in. And they said artists are also less hesitant about just saying buy our stuff, because obviously there was a kind of a moral reason to help us out because we don't have any touring income. And I think they also just saw the knock-on effect of that if they started to do stuff, if they genuinely started to push stuff, then products would sell. But also they wanted to get more involved with the types of products that were being put together. So limited edition things, that kind of thing, fan incentives, secret links for super fans where they got stuff early or they could buy limited edition merchandise. So I think that's probably the big change that we'll see next year, which is D2C has, I don't think come of age is the right term, but I think that artists are going to be much more involved with D2C than they ever have been in the past. And that can only be for the good, I think.
Yeah, it's an interesting. It has a lot of sort of interesting consequences in terms of the power balance between communicating with that audience, which has historically gone through a number of gatekeepers. And if the artists and the artist team are doing it directly, there's a whole load of questions there around who is the marketing for and what and why.
Yeah, but it's even just participating with the D2C store themselves, actually giving over time to that in the same way that they would give over time to do, I don't know, a YouTube session or do an interview with The Guardian or whatever. So they're seeing this as just something that they have to constantly engage with. And it's something that they can be creative around. It's not just a sales blast and buy a t-shirt and the vinyl edition of the album and a tote bag. They see that this can now become part of the wider campaign. So if they think about retail as just another creative component rather than the end result, the end destination, retail can become part of the creative process. I think certainly there will be some artists that just don't like doing that feel incredibly uncomfortable in they don't want to be Krusty the Clown and say buy my product or service. But I think they've now seen it outside of just being a commercial undertaking, that it can be, if they're involved, it can be a lot more creative.
Yeah, I think we are all a little bit Krusty the Clown these days, and I think people will embrace it to an extent. Well, on that note, then,
it's good enough. That was his catchphrase.
Yes, right. Well, with that in mind, maybe not the last bit, but everything before that, what we'll do now is have a look at some examples of the picks from our panel, their favorite campaigns of the year. Eamonn, we'll start with you, and this example who's technology making audience all sort of in a. You talk us. Perhaps you can talk us through this, and then I'll share the screen. I'll screen share it with the audience so we can see it for real.
You went a little bit max headroom there. There's one for our younger readers.
Sorry.
Yes,
okay.
That's fine.
Sorry
no,
about that.
No, that's fine.
I'll try again.
Right. So
perhaps you can share the first one for us. Yeah.
So this is LA Priest. So they are. It's a domino act. They had a new album called Gene, and it was made. It's Sam Eastgate is LA Priest, and had this kind of handmade analog drum machine that he made the new album on, and then that kind of became incorporated into the market and to kind of bring this analog drum machine into digital life. And it was there as a driver for the pre-album singles and also kind of interactive thing as well. So what they were doing was, or what he was doing before the album was, he was putting out individual singles. I think they did 3 singles, maybe 4 singles before the album dropped. And each one, they kind of created this, what they called the Gene machine.
I'll share that now and we can actually take a look at it. So we should be able to see the Gene machine on screen, as it were. So we can... this, you should be able to hear it as well.
Yeah.
So can you talk us through this, and I'll press some buttons and see what happens.
So basically, it's like it is a digital kind of reiteration of the actual drum machine that he used to build the album. So there's kind of different stems fed into it. So you can click on different points and different parts of the track come in. So you're kind of remixing the song on the fly, which is like there's a lot of kind of remix technology out there, but I just thought this was a really smart interface, and the graphics evolved as well. The more you kind of played around with it, the different component parts of the track that you put in. But the clever thing for this was that to be able to mess around with it, that you had to either pre-save the album on Spotify, pre-add it on Apple Music, or sign up to the mailing list. So it was a kind of a follow data gathering exercise. And also, I guess it was a way to kind of build up anticipation for the album, because there'd be a different track would be dropped. And it was just like, as you can see on the screen there, it's a really, really simple interface. It flows really well. You can just kind of play around with it. You don't need to be a muso or a tech head to really get it. And with that, I just think it was a really nice way of kind of setting up the album, but crucially kind of getting followers, getting email addresses and so forth for kind of future marketing. It's on the surface it looks really simple, but it's one of those things that's quite addictive the more you kind of play around with it and realize what you can do with it.
And is this going to change through the campaign? Will it with different songs?
Each different track that was released ahead of the album there was obviously different stems for each of the tracks, and the graphics changed as well. So it was something that it was a core idea, but they said they could completely reskin it. So it looked different for each new single. So there's different versions of this for the different songs ahead of the album. So it's just a nice little thing. And then obviously when you signed up on the mailing list, you got a notification for when the next one was there. So you could hear the track, but also kind of play around with it. And I just think that, there's a lot of stuff done to kind of get email data or to get followers. So it's kind of a free track, it's pretty boring. And I think something like this, particularly the type of music LA Priest does, and fans are kind of into this kind of analog technology as well. So it's kind of bringing this analog world into a digital world. And I think it was perfectly kind of perfectly themed for his audience as well. It's like, if they're really into this sort of stuff, here's basically the equipment I made the album on. Play around with it yourselves. And so it's a data gathering mechanic, but it's also kind of a bit behind the scenes as well. So
it's quite clever, isn't it? Because it's really engaging his audience on the exact level that they want to be engaged at, which is of creation, and it's exciting. I mean, you could play around with that for a long time, very happily.
Yeah, it's kind of digital. It's kind of analog catnip for people who are into stuff like this. It works so well. There's obviously a lot of really smart technology beneath it to make this happen in the browser. And it just flows really well. I just thought it was really smart and a really refreshing way to do data capture in a way that didn't feel like data capture we're going to hammer you with sales messages. You're actually getting something really clever and fun to play around with.
You're getting a really good reward at the end of it, which is do you think this is the kind of thing? I mean, obviously this wouldn't work for every artist, but this is very standalone. This is nothing. It's unusual in the fact that you're actually remixing the songs yourself. That's a fairly new thing in itself. Do you think we're going to see more next year of this kind of artists that perhaps, like you said, they're branching out, looking at D2C stuff, and they're looking for new ways to engage that audience outside of touring and DJing, whatever. Do you think we might start to see a bunch of apps and web apps and things like that?
I think for certain artists, it kind of reminded me of some of the stuff that Plastic Man did with the app that you could kind of use when he was playing live and kind of interact with the light show and things like that. And it's a certain type of artist. So, like, obviously, LA Priest on Domino, but you could see loads of artists on something like Ninja Tune or Warp, or I guess K7 or something like that, really kind of push on this kind of thing, because it's not going to work for I don't know, Dua Lipa or kind of a more kind of big pop artist like that. But for this kind of audience who are really into kind of the recording process and kind of different sounds and playing around with weird bits of kit, I think it's absolutely perfect.
It's interesting, actually. We'll move on to Marlen's in a second, but it's interesting looking at all of these ones that you've picked, is that they've all really like laser focused on exactly what their audience wants, their specific niche fan base. They've identified it. And in this case, he said, well, look, my fans are probably tech, like music tech geeks, and they want to play around. They've probably got some sort of analog modular synthesizers at home, and here's one that's just for me, which is really smart, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thanks, Eamonn. So, Marlen, you're next. Next up, congratulations. You picked a couple of really interesting ones. Let's start with Haim.
Yes.
Who, well, perhaps you can explain what you thought was really good about this and why, and we'll share some clips in a minute.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed their campaign for the album Women in Music Part 3. And it had a couple of different things. So I guess the biggest aspect of it was that they did weekly Zoom dance classes. So every Sunday they would go onto Zoom and teach like their iconic dances. And I really like that because, first of all, if you think of Haim, they always have these like incredibly simplistic but really great videos where they always just like walk down the street and do some fun dance moves. So when I saw that, I immediately had like these dance moves in mind. And it was also kind of promoting their current single at the time, I Know Alone, where the whole video is kind of the dance they were then teaching. And yeah, it was just really great. I think it was also very accessible because it was not like a dance class where you had to be a really, really good dancer. All of these moves were just really fun and simple, so everyone could join. And I think it was just a nice idea at a time when everyone was going to Instagram Live and trying to figure out what they were going to do. And some artists obviously did like live sessions, and others also did like workout sessions together, and I just think that worked really well for them.
Yeah, again, it's a really good example of them understanding their audience really well. And like you say, the aesthetic they had was perfect for the situation. The DIY thing, they had to cancel their tour. They were very strongly affected by coronavirus as an artist. Let's have a look at a couple of the videos here. Marlen has picked a few for us to look at. The first one, there's one which is advertising you were saying about their dance classes that they did every week on Zoom, right? So here is the video, I would say shot in inimitable Haim style.
Hi, we're Haim. Do you dance? Dance. 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 Dance with us. Yeah! Dance with us
every Sunday for the next 4 Sundays.
You'll learn dances like I Want You Back, Little of Your Love,
If I Could Change Your Mind,
and of course,
I Know Alone.
See you there. Yeah!
Which is great, isn't it? I mean, it absolutely targets their audience perfectly. And what were the results of this with the dance classes? This was on Zoom, so
it was used as like an initiative to also grow their mailing list, which was great because I think their album was pushed back a few months. So they also used that to kind of grow their mailing list in advance of the release, which was really good. But they also did some of them on Instagram Live. And I've just looked it up. Their Instagram grew massively since May. So when you look it up on Chartmetric, you just see how it really goes up. So I think it worked out really well for them.
A really good example of making really, I hate to use the phrase engaging content, but if you make videos that are exactly in tune with what your audience want in a way that really feels natural and that advertises what you do, it's the perfect combination, isn't it? Like for instance, this one here was their One More Haim UK tour announcement for next year, which this one is, I mean, quite brazen in that they just nick a Daft Punk song and use that to advertise their tour, but it's really good as well. Here it is.
Time.
Which which is great. It's impossible to dislike that. I think you'd have to have a heart of stone.
I remember seeing that on my feed, and definitely like I stopped because it was so eye-catching and it was so much fun. And all of the pieces of content they put out throughout the year, they were always very fun. You could see that they kind of shot the stuff at home. So also a great example of artists shooting their own assets for social media at home. And
yeah, exactly. I mean, they did a load of content like this, and Eamonn was talking about D2C. Well, this is about as D as it gets, isn't it? They're just shooting it themselves, and they're putting it out there, and people are loving it. Let's show one more, Marlen, because they really did produce a lot of like quite enjoyable stuff. And this one, I mean, and to show how basic it can get, this is basically just Haim jumping into a swimming pool and
promoting their song.
Promoting their song, and this is currently clocking up several 100,000 views.
Ooh, that's your summer girl. Ooh, that's your summer girl. Ooh, that's your summer girl. That's your summer girl.
Well, it occurs to me, I presume that we're sort of walking, we're sort of treading all over sorts of licensing laws by Shireen sharing that on Zoom, which is, I apologize to anyone who feels offended. What does this say about, you're saying this is all very DIY, it feels real, it feels really nice. What does this say about what people how artists might take this forward next year? In terms of, we've seen very polished campaigns on Instagram with high quality videos. And then there's this, which takes 10 minutes to shoot and is great fun. What do you think the impact might be of this?
Yeah, I really liked it because like it was very authentic. It was the tour one was also personalized. So I really liked that they had one specifically made for the UK. So I felt immediately like, they were talking to me because I'm living here. And just showing that you don't always have to create like this really glossy asset, and you can just shoot content at home that's fun and that's actually more engaging for people, is I think great. And this tour asset is just so different from what I mostly see on Instagram, and it definitely I think helps or should help more artists to understand that they don't always have to spend lots of money to create these
again, that's another common thread, isn't it? That when you have to pivot quickly to do something else, you can make something quickly. But if you understand yourself as an artist and the audience, it doesn't matter. It's actually better, isn't it? Which is great. Yeah, thanks, Marlen. That's a really good one. So Patrick, you are next. You've picked a couple of quite different and interesting examples. The first one, let's talk about Fontaine's DC.
Sure thing, Joe. Well, Fontaine's DC, I think, kind of aiming he didn't actually see my notes on this one, has set up this specific campaign very, very well. And that a lot of what they did was emphasis on this working together aspect that Eamonn sort of pulled together, as well as like the direct consumer aspect, which I thought was really, really powerful. But one of the really standout things about this entire campaign, and if you think about the band, a lot of activity happened in 2019, then going down into 2020. Obviously, what we had there, they had to pivot, of course, as many artists did, but they really built on what they were already doing, which was, started out was playing clubs, doing live, then moving into a lot of traditional drivers like physical retail, doing press, and then they were able to actually take that head of steam and convert it in 2020, where a lot of those physical events and those live things couldn't be taken on, and actually to translate those into the digital world. And as I'm sure we're all very aware of, the chart battle with Taylor Swift, which is quite an amazing thing, seeing Partisan Records, bringing a campaign like this and actually having a chart battle with the likes of Taylor Swift.
So this was a really great example of I hate to say scrappy indie band, but it was a real sort of grassroots. It felt sort of movement. It felt real. It felt believable, and the growth that they did was, like you said, was all across the board, and they were able to just make forward steps, connecting to not only their fans but really growing the fan base until they became so much bigger than they were before. Like you say, to the point where, as you can see on the screen here, I think Taylor Swift got to the #1 slot by only 3,500 sales, which is not, it is not much. And according to this article, at least, she released the CDs early to help secure that #1 spot, which is interesting as well, isn't it?
Cheat.
Well,
Dirty move, Taylor.
All fair in love and war, I guess. And here the plucky lads are clutching their pot plants, which is very on trend at the moment as well. Patrick, so they've played to their strengths. Again, this is another example of them playing to their strengths. How could they extend this further now? Because they've really made a huge gains, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think they definitely played to their strengths, and everything seemed natural. And one of the quotes that I actually liked that came out was when they did sign to Partisan. So that was like announced after the last Great Escape that happened. It was very much not this sort of band signs to label and everything changes. Especially working closely with Partisan, they actually took everything that was going on. The label signed them because of that activity, and then didn't jump in and actually hinder that, and they actually supplemented it. And one of the other things when we talk about technology and talk about communicating, of course, they were able to, in the past, to communicate their look and feel through their live shows. That was what got the buzz around them. They did extensive touring, not only around the UK, but across Europe, even into North America. So they laid all that groundwork, thankfully, before that got taken away. But then they had to transition a lot of that to how do we keep that same feel without being able to go in front of an audience. And I think some of the ways they did that was with their music videos, costing very little, some of them being shot all in one take, with the idea of just really taking the kind of gritty feel that you would have got from the band and putting that into a digital world. And another place I think they did a really good job of that is with album artwork, where, you know, we live in the walled gardens of Spotify, Apple Music, or whatever DSP you happen to be on. And of course, there's space to communicate yourself musically there, but to actually communicate visually, there's very limited space. And they actually worked really hard with the label to make sure that their visuals actually kept up the representation that people were used to and the expectation that people had built around this band, and actually translated that into a digital sense, which of course doesn't always work.
Yeah, there's a sort of, they've now sort of elevated themselves to this sort of series of guitar indie bands at the moment in Britain and around the world that seem to be able to retain this kind of 7-inch vinyl authenticity, but also in the digital space, which is really exciting, isn't it? And where do you think?
Can I interject at this point to stop a international incident, or when you said British or Irish, so they will not be.
Sorry, yes, sorry, Eamonn.
That's fine.
British Isles, I think, was what I was looking for there. Yes.
Don't use that one, Joe. That's not.
No, again, I mean, I'm talking geographic sense alone, of course.
As an Irish passport holder, I have to stand up for them, I think.
No, I appreciate that. Thanks, Eamonn, and I apologise profusely.
This is not all about the boys from the better land, yeah. Just to point that out.
Thanks, thanks, Patrick. Well, maybe we should move.
Did you pick this campaign because you appear to be in the band? Look at the picture of them. Check shirt.
Hey.
Yes,
I'm in a lot of indie bands these days, actually. If you look at the pictures, I'm generally in the background somewhere. But yeah, I pick my own bands. I think actually the reason I picked this was a good friend of mine introduced them to me at a warehouse party when that was a thing a long time ago. And it kind of came full circle, wearing his "Life Ain't Always Empty" t-shirt, which was a great tagline for especially 2020. And wearing that t-shirt and walking along and someone going, "Hey, what is that? Life ain't always empty." And then someone else just across the street goes, "Fontaines, DC," just to give the idea of how this really did permeate into the consciousness of the people, especially across the United Kingdom.
And it goes again back to that idea of it retains that sort of indie authenticity of of t-shirts and vinyl and merchandise and gigging, which is, and they've managed to maintain it even through a 9-month period where all of that is but essentially impossible.
They did. They did lots of. I'm sorry, but on the live side of things, they did lots of really good live streams, because you said that the live thing was so important to them, because like it was, people would go and see them, and that just seeing them live completely takes that. Anyway, where's my phone going? Sorry about that. I'm gonna let her. My landline. Nobody rings on my landline.
Proof Eamonn is a robot. I knew it.
Fascinating use of old technology popping into a live stream here. So appropriately, actually talking about Fontaines DC and authenticity. So yeah, thanks, Eamonn. Okay, so let's speaking of Eamonn, let's go back round to him. We have one more choice from him, and this is quite a different approach to the first one you had, which was LA Priest. But this again is another campaign which is very, very multifaceted and worked in on a lot of fronts with a lot of different ways, but really worked well, doesn't it?
Yeah. So this is the Midnight, which is kind of records kind of via Ninja Tune. So they had kind of to set up the album. One of the lead tracks was called Prom Night, which obviously our American viewers will understand the concept of prom night. I think we've probably seen enough 80s Brat Pack movies to understand the importance, the cultural importance of prom night in America. So they did a really kind of simple thing. And again, it was another kind of follower sign up kind of activity, which was they integrated a website called top40weekly.com with Spotify's API, and they created this kind of drop down menu. So you would pick the month when it would have been your prom night, which I think is it like 18, Patrick? Is that when you're at prom? 17?
You prom night, 17, 18, that sort of thing.
Right,
Very,
okay.
very important time in someone's life.
Yeah. So yes. So you put in your email address and you pick the month and the year, and it basically pulls together a playlist based on what is in the top 40. But it actually smartly filters out some stuff, because when I spoke to the people at Ninja Tune about this, they had a kind of a musicological layer on top of that, which pulled out ballads. So it was more up tempo kind of chart hits, which was really interesting. And then obviously they interspersed that with midnight tracks. So it just kind of generated this playlist, which is kind of like a little bit like that Spotify playlist is it Time Tunnel, or the one that basically kind of picks music from when you were around about this age. So it kind of played that whole nostalgia thing, but it was also kind of dropping in midnight tracks, and they had a generator, so it generated its own specific artwork on Spotify. So if you saved it as a playlist, it had bespoke artwork for your date and your playlist, and obviously lots of kind of social sharing. And then they did, and this is a really interesting D2C response to COVID as well. Kind of later on, they realized that all the touring had to end. So what they did was they did this kind of fans first initiative, which with Spotify, which was to get fans. They created this limited edition T-shirt that you could only buy if you were kind of on this fans first kind of mailing list. And all the proceeds from that went to their road crew, who were obviously out of work.
Oh, that's very good.
So there was a really nice kind of philanthropic side to it. And also a nice little reward for the fans. I just thought that was a really, really nice touch to kind of say, right, okay, well, everyone, like all artists, particularly small independent artists, are finding it really difficult this year. But then you've got these people whose entire livelihood has gone to the wall. So I think it was just a really nice gesture by them. It was a way to acknowledge the people around them, but also kind of reward the fans.
And that sort of philanthropic part, which has been in a lot of people's campaigns this year. And I think it's almost a little bit like you were saying earlier, that artists have previously been a little bit hesitant to ask, hey, can you pay me, please? Like, if you've ever worked with artists and said, hey, can you just give a shout out to the merch store from the stage? They don't really want to do it, but now they do. And this is something else, which is, it doesn't seem like, these things don't seem like token gestures. They seem about, community and something which the fans are part of, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, I really, really like that. And as you say, we kind of did see lots of other artists do this, and it was able to kind of straddle those worlds of the kind of the people that help put their shows on and their fans, and all they are doing in the middle is kind of facilitating this meeting, and also hopefully raising some money for the road crew that kind of needed it. And kind of they also did some really nice kind of D2C bundles as well, kind of beyond that. So they had this, let me see what it was called. They had what they call the expansion pass. So they had lots of stuff, and you can see it there on the right-hand side. So they created these little coasters as part of a bundle that came in a miniature pizza box, and they were done like floppy disks, which kind of plays into their whole kind of 90s aesthetic as well. So
Some strong sort of nostalgia here, but in a good way, isn't it? They've really nailed a certain feel.
Yeah, and they had a fanzine in there as well. So I thought they would like they created these really good products rather than. I don't want to criticize anybody who sells tote bags, but they're probably the laziest thing to do.
Go ahead. Why not? Who needs more tote bags? I've got a tote bag full of tote bags.
Well, you know, in obviously we're not supposed to have plastic bags from supermarkets, and they charge you rightly to have them because their house is with plastic bags. My house is coming down with promotional tote bags. I've kind of had enough of them now. So they're the new kind of landfill. So I think anything that goes beyond that is, and coasters. You always need coasters. You don't want to leave water rings on a nice work surface or table.
Absolutely don't. Pet peeve of mine as well. Yeah, and they also did some other interesting things. So that's the sort of merchandise side, and the sort of the and of course you were saying with the creating the prom playlist, they're harvesting everyone's emails so they can put a really, I guess, with the year of when they know the year of the prom as well, they know the date of birth to an extent, which is kind of clever. But they also did some interesting digital stuff, including live streams and videos, which also reflected this.
They did this. They did lots of stuff on Twitch and YouTube. They had this thing called the Echo Chamber, because it was based on, let me check my notes, they have a song called The Search for Echo, and Echo the Dolphin is this kind of recurring motif. This
is the 90s Sega mascot, isn't it? A dolphin. And a very, as I remember it, a very chill video game where you escape from... Are you trying to solve a nuclear disaster or something? I can't remember.
I don't know, because I didn't spend the 1990s smoking relaxing cigarettes, so I didn't really get into playing video games at home. But yeah, they like that idea of kind of doing live streams on Twitch and on YouTube as well, kind of helped fill that gap from them not playing live. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this campaign, but it was all very precise. Again, going back to your point about LA Priest and creating this campaign that absolutely understood the stuff that the fans are into. All of their reference points are completely beautifully synchronized with their fans' interests. So I think it's really good that rather than kind of creating a very bland campaign that's trying to appeal to everyone, it wasn't a kind of snobbish, exclusive campaign, kind of if you don't get the reference points, you're not welcome. But I think by kind of playing on those reference points with their fans, that kind of built a better connection, I think. But also just what they were doing was fun. You didn't necessarily have to be entirely into a kind of 90s aesthetic or anything like that to get it. It was fun, and I think that's probably a thing that sometimes overlooked in campaigns. Sometimes they're quite serious. And going back to what Marlen was doing, Marlen was talking about with Hein, they were prepared to have fun. They were prepared to make themselves look a bit silly, and it was all kind of tongue-in-cheek and self-aware and stuff like that. But that stuff really travels because fans like that, but also people who aren't necessarily fans go, well, this is quite cool. I like them. I like the colour of their jib.
It's interesting that the three picks so far have all been very human, and part of that has been humour. That the Fontaine's DC, they're not very serious. They joke around. That's part of their sort of indie aesthetic, which is great. And this again is it's very, very coherent across all. Really, what's amazing about this is very coherent all the way across the campaign. But some of this stuff on its own could, if you were taking it seriously, could look cheesy. But actually, they've just embraced some people would perhaps get hung up on, isn't this nostalgia bad? Is it good? They've just embraced it and gone with it, and it's really been successful.
Nostalgia is not what it used to be, etc. But no, I think they do what the best bands do, and I think this kind of relates back to Heim and also to Fontaine's DC. They create a world that is their own, and they invite you into that. And those are kind of the artists that endure the most, I think. Particularly the band, if you're kind of talking in the band context, because then you feel part of that it's kind of like-minded people meeting in the middle, and they've all got, there's a shared aesthetic, there's a shared sensibility, and all in completely different ways. Midnight, Heim, and Fontaine's DC all did that. They created worlds and completely invited the fans in.
And do you think that's going to be, we're looking into next year, possibly where we're feeling hopeful that live events are going to start again. It seems fairly clear now that it's not going to go back to that old duopoly of live plus recorded music equals your income. There's this other section of which is, you know, making money and connecting with people in this way. Is this very sort of quite intimate direct connection with the artist, is this here to stay now? We were going to see more sort of this kind of Heim, building a close team that all sort of feels very together around the artist?
I hope so. I think it's about creating something very encompassing, because there was a kind of default setting about, oh, you've got social media, so that's your world, and it doesn't necessarily work that way. I think it has to kind of cut across the entire campaign, so that cuts across, I don't know, the causes that they support, that cuts across the politics, that cuts across the visual aesthetics. And I think you can't really do that on social media alone. So that kind of cuts through. And I think also in a world where sleeve artwork has kind of been pushed to the periphery in a kind of everything's a thumbnail size, you can build an aesthetic that goes beyond the actual the bit of cardboard, the bit of 12 by 12 cardboard that used to encase the LP, and you can do that across all of the different platforms. And you can use things like Twitch, or you can use even a playlist that kind of puts your aesthetic in there. So that's that. I think something that's much more inclusive, much broader, more holistic, we think, is really, and that also shows artists who really understand visuals. And I think it used to be visuals, the default setting was just do a video and get on MTV. But that idea of kind of having just this consistent visual aesthetic, and it doesn't, like, if we look at something like, even though Morrissey is a terrible person now, but if you look at the way the Smiths used their album sleeves and single sleeves to make all of these very esoteric reference points, or even somebody like Cincinnati and the way that they do all the reference points they make, or the Manic Street Preachers, or people like that, they bring you into they create a world, and they go, this is our world, come in and you will learn lots of stuff. And I think we'll hopefully see a lot more of that. And I think that's probably a more interesting community than just following what they're following.
It's also sort of interesting in a sense that they're really pushing into their community, and they're saying, look, we know you like this, we know you're into this vaporwave 90s retro feel thing, and of course everything they do is, the ambition is to grow that fan base, but at the same time they're sort of doubling down in the sector they already know, and they're getting rewarded for it. And so it's almost saying that, like, you should, that you mustn't take your audience for granted. In fact, if anything, you should ask more of them, and they'll come along.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I think it's a really smart campaign that understands why their audience are there, and it rewards them for being fans. But I don't think it excludes outside people as well. If you're coming to them for the first time, it's not so esoteric that you're going to find it impenetrable. Yeah,
it really, and it's one of the most coherent campaigns I can remember seeing in so many different ways. Really amazing.
The whole thing, there's just a complete feel throughout it all. It looks really good as well. It just looks brilliant.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Eamonn. Okay, Marlen, we're back to you. I can see it's getting dark in London. So your second pick was 21 Pilots, and they did something really interesting, which was sort of using new technology available on YouTube as well. What did they do?
So they did a never-ending music video where they incorporated fan videos. And they used the live function on YouTube to do that. So it's been streaming since June. And I think it's great for a couple of different reasons. So first of all, just making use of this live feature, which is usually quite difficult for individual artists, because how can you keep up with having content constantly coming in? Then incorporating their fans into it, so they obviously would go and watch the video trying to spot themselves. So the whole video is kind of like every 3 minutes and 40 seconds of the length of the song, they create a new video incorporating these.
And so they asked their fans to send in video around a theme,
so
and then
they created like a microsite, and fans could then upload short clips of themselves, and they would then incorporate that into the video.
Okay, let's have a quick look at the video, and we can chat about it as well afterwards. Hopefully you can hear the sound as always. So here we are. Here it is. I will click live, and that will take us to the point which is being streamed right now. Hopefully. Told you a level of concern, but you walk by like you never heard. You could bring down my. And as you can see, if you look at the chat here, it's highly engaged. There's a lot going on here as well. I presume people saying, "Oh my God, that's me." I'm just gonna. No offense to 21 Pilots, but I'm just gonna turn it down significantly. So. And how long does this go on for? I mean, how long is Never Ending?
Yeah, good question. I think they're actually right now trying to verify it as the longest music video ever, which is actually like a really nice marketing driver as well. And I don't know if they plan to stop it anytime soon. So I would be actually quite interested to see how they're going to continue using it in their campaign. So if they maybe, if they will start dropping in new content in there, teasing upcoming campaign stuff, and yeah, just kind of continue using that, continue to build watch time, and hide announcements in there, which I think would be quite cool. But I don't know.
But it becomes a great sort of creative endeavor in itself, where you can say, well, we had the longest video. It's been running since. I mean, to say that the video has been running since June is kind of crazy in itself, isn't it? And the fact that you could, like you say, use it in so many ways. You could drop in golden tickets if you like. So if you've seen it and you write the code down, you get access to something like that.
Yeah, and I think 21 Pilots, they always do quite fan-centric campaigns with lots of like scavenger hunts, and they really try to bring their fan community together and do interesting things around that. And one thing that I think is also quite cool, they could, if they wanted to, extract, like once the live stream ends, they could extract parts of the video as like the full song, and that becomes chart eligible. So they could potentially create like a couple of different versions of the same song with different fan videos, and have that all on their YouTube channel. So there are lots of different opportunities to further make use of this live stream.
I'm interested in two things. One, how this actually happens. Is it put together algorithmically and they sort of shuffle it together and it keeps on going?
I don't know either.
Yeah, I want to know that. The other thing I want to know is what happens if you use a stream ripper to try and download this video from YouTube. What could possibly happen or go wrong there? The laptop melting down immediately. So this is again is a really good example of like you said, they're being very, very fan-centric here, but they're putting the fans right at the center of their campaign and everything about them. And I presume that fans must be desperate for them to do another one so they can create more content.
Yeah, and it's just great because it kind of, in a very natural way, incentivizes the fans to create videos and content around the song, and then they share that on their own networks, and it becomes this massive promotional network for them without them having to do much. But it's like the fans taking over the promotion.
Yeah, amazing. And of course, there's so much you can do with this in the future. Do you think that, I mean, I've seen a few artists doing similar things with long live streams. I saw Forde, the electronic artist, putting, I think, 12 or 24-hour looping streams on YouTube. Essentially, they're creating their own radio. I mean, okay, in this case, it's just one song over and over again. And I guess after a while, you start to go a bit crazy. But one extension of this is that artists are sort of creating highly engaged radio stations within YouTube, and they could, I mean, like you said, they could mix this up anyhow. They could insert more songs, more anything to this. Is this something that perhaps you might say, we've seen lots of change with YouTube. They're launching new features around doing premieres. Is this something which could be a big part of Armory in marketing campaigns next year?
You mean the live streams or the premieres?
These sort of things like this, where they're using the live tool to do something creative and
yeah, definitely. I think YouTube is such an important platform for any artist, really, and it's great that they've been launching all of these tools, and just kind of an additional chance for artists to do something exciting on the platform and talk to the fans. That's the great thing about YouTube anyway, that there are more social features on there than on other platforms. So it's a great way for artists to go on there and actually directly talk to the fans, which they can't do everywhere.
Yeah, like I say, we're seeing lots more use of that, especially in terms of premieres and things like that coming up. So it'll be interesting to watch next year how people actually engage with YouTube, fans and artists. So thanks, Marlen. That was great. And Patrick, last but by no means least, and I mean that sincerely, your second choice was an artist close to your heart.
It was actually my first choice, Joe, always my first choice. This one I had to include because I didn't even know it was a campaign. So obviously, 2020 live music, not so much happening. We all took to YouTube again to go from 21 pilots there. And this one actually caught me, and it's the Grateful Dead. So 2020 was a big year for the band in an anniversary sense, and I'm not really even going to talk about that. But their two most accessible studio albums, Working Man's Dead and American Beauty, turned 50 this year. But that wasn't necessarily the thing, because if anyone knows, the best Dead was always live Dead. So what they did was, and the label actually helped with this, Warner Music, just basically leaning in to the YouTube platform and setting stuff free. So they started this Shakedown Stream, which for any Deadheads out there, Shakedown Stream is coming from the name Shakedown Street, which is the name of an album. But more importantly, Shakedown Street was if you went to a Grateful Dead concert and basically made your way up into the venue, you would get offered all sorts of substances, as well as merch that the band would license, and I won't even go into all
drugs
that.
at Grateful Dead concerts?
Possibly, I think so. Yeah, it might have been one of the things. But yeah, so they basically they leaned into this concept of the Shakedown Street, which was the community around the dead, for lack of a better word. And they did, as you can see, Shakedown Stream or Shakedown Scream this Halloween specific episode. Those that might know, the Dead, those that are left still play. Some of them do under Dead and Company, with John Mayer taking Jerry Garcia's place. So they had John Mayer on here, bringing in a younger audience. But one of the challenges often, and especially for a catalog artist, is how do you create new content? Well, they did this by pulling in a historian and an archivist to go in and basically talk and have this Shakedown Stream pre-show where they would basically go in and talk about various aspects of the Dead, but then also just repurposing content. So they went and put their 1977 DVD, which I actually own, and put that just for free. They put on lots of shows that had never been up, high quality shows. And I found myself looking and watching 2 hour and 40-minute Grateful Dead shows when there was no live music. And it wasn't just around their limited recorded output, but if anyone looks their catalog up online, you'll see that there is a ridiculous amount of live. And they really took that live experience and put it on YouTube.
So this is quite nuanced in a way, isn't it? Because they're not, like you said at the beginning, what is the campaign for? It's not for an album. It's not for, it's not specifically tied to these 50-year anniversaries. It's around the concept of the Grateful Dead, right? And they're bringing existing fans and new fans in a fairly, well, in a way that, like you say, exactly nails what the Grateful Dead are all about. How do you think they could build on this? Because you said that this is live is the key thing with them. So how can they perhaps take this forward?
Well, they continue to release content on the channel. Everything was fundraising based, so in this sort of giving economy as well. They raised over $300,000, giving it to charities. I donated, lots of people donated. And they just kept it going. And I mean, they took the concepts of innovation, improvisation, community, and put those together onto this channel. And they continue to put new shows up because there are so many shows. So they keep putting up new content. And I will say, as it worked on me, I find myself going in, listening to more Dead than I ever had on places like Apple Music or Spotify. And also getting this older consumer of the Dead to connect, like you say, with the younger audience. I saw people using features on YouTube that little known features of tagging specific points of the video and commenting, and it actually created a community much like a Grateful Dead show would on the internet when everyone was in lockdown, isolation, needing some feeling of connection. And there you go, you feel like you're in 1984, 1977, whatever show they happen to pick, actually getting an interactive experience.
So it's really adding a lot of contextual information around it for people who like to wallow in that kind of fandom, but also unites them. I mean, again, you can see if you go back to the previous screen in the chat on the right there, people are just hyper engaged and really excited to be there, even though they're all apart, which is great, isn't it? And they were also they were collecting money, weren't they? People could donate at the same time.
It was I mean, you can see the donate button there. It was very big, wide donate button. You get a little mention once you donated. And like I said, they put all of this, they repurposed content, which is one part of it for catalog artists. That's very important. Put all these things in front of the paywall. And now they've actually converted this YouTube channel, which I believe at last checking has 236,000 subscribers, 91,000 new subscribers. And now they have a platform. I mean, I know now my YouTube notifications go crazy with the amount of content they're putting up there. And they've actually built a platform from a marketing perspective where they can go back and talk about Grateful Dead things, because we're all connected, we've subscribed, and it keeps showing more and more content. So they're playing with this idea of this constant releasing. But if you're a band that's obviously not active anymore, how do you do that? Well, take your archives, put them out there, set it free, and lean into the giving economy.
This is sort of part of that constant tricky problem, isn't it? If you are a catalog artist, how do you keep your catalog fresh? Well, this is quite smart in that it's leaning very heavily on live, and you can easily start to point people back towards a catalog. Perhaps even people who consider themselves fans, perhaps haven't investigated a certain period in their career, and they see a certain gig from a certain point in the 70s, and they listen to the albums from around then. It could really have a large network effect, couldn't it?
It certainly has. And like I said, there's so much live content, which I think the funny thing is, at the time that people were taping their shows, the label, this is back in the 70s, was saying, no, this is awful. Well, now all of these records are actually released via Warner. They're on streaming services. So suddenly they've not only got, the archive of officially reported things, but a ridiculous archive of which the surface hasn't even been scratched. And they got, I think, 2 albums in the charts this year. One was only on CD, Dave's Picks 25. Yes, a CD album. And they've also got American Beauty back in the charts with a 50-year anniversary. So just shows the breadth and what you can do in this specific place, doing YouTube. And they also made a podcast.
Wow, they even made a podcast. So again, they're really connecting on all sorts of fronts there. That's great, isn't it? And a very happy year for you, I imagine, being able to dig into all this.
I'm still not done listening.
And will you ever be done listening? I don't think so, Patrick. So that's it. So thanks, everybody. That's we've looked at 6 of the best campaigns, or the campaigns that have stuck in the memories of our Musicalize marketing experts. So thanks to you all, Marlen, Patrick, and Eamonn, for joining us. Don't forget, next week the end of your Sandbox edition will be released. Eamonn, is there any one final hard sell you'd like to make on this that people could look forward to?
No, I think that they will hopefully enjoy it. I don't know. Obviously, not every campaign that was submitted could be included. As I say, we had to increase the number of entries to 50 because we were just completely overwhelmed. But I think it's a good kind of encapsulation of the year. I think it's pretty broad in terms of the genres and the different techniques. There are obviously little spot prizes for certain campaigns that we liked that used a particular tool or took a particular approach. So we've awarded them a special little Rosetta. And nice. There's a lot of great stuff there. So hopefully next year we will see even more.
Excellent.
Although that will make our jobs incredibly difficult when it comes to actually processing all the entries. But if you have entered, thank you so much for entering. If you haven't entered next year, you can.
I'm sure you are very much up to the task, Eamonn. So
I will just have no life forward to. Oh well, I have no life. It's fine. Yeah.
There you go. The perfect way to pass the time. You could pop on some Grateful Dead podcasts and just see it all the way through. You could combine a lot of this stuff. If you want to read the end of your Sandbox with the marketing awards of the year, the best marketing campaigns, you can click the link that Patrick has just shared in chat to the knowledge. You get the email next week. It will be in there, and you can put your feet up over Christmas.
Next
and enjoy it.
Wednesday, I believe, is it?
It's next Wednesday, the 9th. I think it's
Yes.
out. So next Wednesday, the 9th of December, will be released. Keep your eyes out for that. And that's it. As ever, this is the last Music Ally TV of the year. We're all going to go and read the Sandbox and put our feet up and drink Glühwein, which is a good enough way to pass the time.
Yeah. Sushi
Joe?
and Glühwein.
Joe, I was
Yes.
just wondering, that jumper that you're wearing, that doesn't have to be Christmas themed, does it?
It is my Christmas Wu-Tang Clan jumper,
Is it?
which has the bees on the sleeves as well. And I will say was embarrassingly large amount of money for something that I only wear for 1 month a year. But
Is it a winter wonderland? Well,
it's very good. Thank you, Eamonn.
Oh.
It certainly is. It certainly is that. And on that note, thank you, everybody. Thank you all for joining us out there. And if you've been joining us throughout the year, we're very grateful and happy that you could be with us through 18 episodes now. And we'll be back in the new year. Keep an eye on your inbox and we will contact you and let you know the first show and the first topics. But for now, have a great Christmas. Eamonn, Marlen, Patrick, thank you very much. And have a great weekend. Goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.